Here goes the counter. Hello, everyone. Just gonna wait a few seconds. Yeah, this is growing
We have
fast.
a flood at the gate.
Yeah. Oh, it's impressive. Thank you for all being on time. Just gonna wait 10 more seconds and we're gonna start. So Dominic, Denis, you guys ready?
Yes, we
Absolutely.
are.
Hello, everyone.
Let's do this. Awesome. So welcome everyone for this special day. It's a training webinar with Denis and Dominic. So very excited about it. This kind of launched our client knowledge initiative. So you've been asking us as our beloved customer about documentation and how-to guides and better knowledge about clients. So this is where we decided to invest a lot in the last few months and for the future quarter as well. The goal is really to make it easy for you to be able to learn and use Client to empower your team. And one of the key value for me is that you have fun running your business and have fun interacting with our system. So that's the goal behind the Client Knowledge Initiative. The first item in that list is those live webinars. So Denis, our professor, and Dominic, our ambassador, will be doing a series of training webinar. This first one has been requested by you. It's about resource planning. Very interesting. They will be recorded so you can share it with your team. For those of you guys that came to the previous webinar, you've heard us talk about the Client University, a 5-day live class with Denis, and it's kind of dedicated to onboard new user on Client. But we have exciting news to announce today. We have our new on-demand Client University that is available as of today. So via our client trails in client community. This is exciting because it provides, at this point, we have 3 main tracks for our on-demand university. So the first one is how to initially configure Client. As an existing customer of ours, this would be already done. This being said, that might be a refresher course on all the different objects and the purpose of each object that we might not be using. So it's worth to be listening to. Denis built us some nice deep dive training on Client PSA main functionality, and a video that's coming in the next few days is going to be kind of a life in a project, so end-to-end demo of the performance path on how to use Client. So this is great. So you can access it from our community, from the URL here on top. You need to have access. From there, you're going to be able to access our client trail. If you go in either the modules or the trail, you're going to see our Client University episodes, and we have the video within. And I want to just congratulate Denis for those videos. It's a very high-level quality. Very excited. You've done a tremendous job, Denis, building those up. So you give a warm feeling, and it's interesting to listen to you. So I'm pretty sure our customers are going to love you too.
You look surprised on the picture, Denis.
I'm sorry?
Denis, you look surprised on the picture.
Yeah.
It's better than the 4 other one I've took before, so you should be pleased.
Yeah, I'm not that good looking, that's for sure.
Perfect. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass the puck to Dominic and Denis so they can drive that first training session with you. So very exciting. Thank you guys, and have fun.
Thank you, Yannick.
Great. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks. Hi, Denis. Thanks, Yannick, for the intro. So yeah, very excited. It's always kind of nerve-wracking to do those things. We do that every day, demonstration, talking with the customer. But for some reason, having, I don't know, with 50, 60, 70 people looking at it live, it's always a bit more, stressing. But very happy
that
to be
now,
here.
Dominic. We're closing to the 100 mark, so it's a bit.
Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, so thanks for that. As Yannick said, me and Denis are going to focus today on the resource planning. We decided as we were preparing that to focus really on more of a project plan perspective. So we'll see it's task scheduling and more on oriented by the project itself. We figured we probably will have a part 2 eventually, as there are different things we had to push aside. You know, that's it's a broad topic. So we are taking a track here. So follow us along on this one, which is you'll find value, I'm pretty sure. So really on that aspect, I'm going to jump pretty quickly into our environment to be hands-on. Just a heads up, we'll also talk about our next session and keep time also for a Q&A. So please use the Q&A capability of Zoom here. If you have any questions, probably keep that for the end. And if we don't have time to get all the questions, we'll do follow-ups, either recordings or emails to you guys. So short disclaimer, following session is in V43, but any similarities with your environment are obviously not coincidental. We are using obviously concepts that works in 38, 39. Obviously, there might be few options that you won't have on that topic, as we talked about that last June. If you haven't seen this recording, I would invite you to do so, presenting the new features in V43. And you can reach out to me if you ever want to take that initiative of moving forward the latest version. So, as I mentioned, we are focusing really on resource management today, taking the track of project plans. So we'll see how we can assign people to tasks or to buckets. So it could be more or less elaborate, but really focusing on that aspect of planning so that eventually we get to the resource planner and have that global visibility on who's doing what, when, and what's upcoming on our pipeline. So let's jump right into the environment here and start. And basically, I'm going to hand over the mic to Denis so that he can engage into that training session. Go ahead, Denis.
Thank you, Dominic. Hello, everyone. So as Dominic and Yannick mentioned, I'm glad to be joining the client education team. Today, my focus will be to discuss the resource planning on the project at the task level. So I'll expose you 2 different ways to assign resources to tasks. That's what we'll focus today. So let's start by going to that standard project record page that we're showing, the Deep Dive Tech Foundation 1. And we'll click, maybe we'll start by using the workspace, the top right corner. So just to put ourselves in a story mode, let's pretend we already know the work that has to be done on this project, right? We already have a structure. So in other words, you'll see that there's already tasks to this project. Now we're either in a context of a smaller team assigning resources to a project, or we're in a context of a project in an earlier project phase. So where we might want to assign roles or what we call placeholders. So just as a reminder, a placeholder is a not yet defined project resource, which you want to consider the workload to ease your understanding of and forecasting of the resource capacity. So it's knowing someone with a specific role will be part of this project. Pretty useful when you have a unstaffed or not fully staffed project yet. So at this point, we use the workspace that was formerly known as Gantt. As you can see, I'm using a very simple layout with only a few task fields determined as column for this view. I want to bring your attention on the estimated hours column. So the value you will see here represent what we estimate in terms of efforts to complete this task. If you look at the scheduled hours, you will see the time scheduled for the yet to be assigned resources. Now let's look at the timeline itself on the right and its relation with the assignment. Well, because we're doing task level assignment, viewing the timeline is very useful to represent where the effort will happen and how long it should take for them, plus any relationship. So when you use the workspace and you do any adjustment of that project plan or maintenance, this will automatically update the resource scheduling when they are assigned. So let's do, depending on your company size, there are many ways to do the resource planning. So let's do the first option together. let's by controlling clicking many tasks, you can use the change resource button at the top. And this will allow you to assign one or many resources straight on these tasks. So if you take the assign to field and you feel, for example, we'll use Jenny Red, this will make Jenny Red assigned to this task. And also any contributors we would like to add, any other project resources to contribute to this task could be added there. That what is created in the back end are tasks assignment. So once this is done, it's gonna assign these hours to automatically and schedule them for the resource. So as you see, Jenny Red has been assigned to the task, and the hours are already scheduled. The other way to do it, if we want to do in a different manner, we could go straight on the task. So, well, let's use the train task, but the schedule tab. And this is accessible by two ways. So either by clicking on the green pen and going to the schedule tab, or for those of you who are using the latest version of Client, you can have a shortcut by clicking in the assignee column. It's going to lead you straight to the schedule tab of the right side panel. So this schedule tab displays information from your task. So if you go look at the header, it's going to be a lot of information is brought back to keep you in context. And right now in the schedule tab, what I want to do is assign a resource. So at this point, let's just pretend that I don't know the resource is going to be assigned. So I'm going to search for a resource. At this point, if you click on search resource, you can search for a role. For example, I'm going to use, since I'm on the train task, I'm going to search for a trainer. And the system will allow me to even narrow down, and we'll explain a bit more later with these other parameters, but narrow down which resource I want to see. So now on this view, you see the results of my search. And I want to bring your attention on the schedule hours and available hours, just so that you know the difference between both. So the scheduled hours will represent the number of the data you see there, represents the hours for which the resource has been scheduled during the time frame of your task. So you rely to the information in the header. Whereas the available hour is going to give you the hours left for this resource to be assigned during that same time frame. So for now, let's select Colin Happy, because she's the most, she has the one with most available hours. And once again, in this, using this option, you could select more than one resource. So once the resource has been selected and you assigned it, you'll see that you have the scheduled hours automatically transferred to this resource, and you'll also see the percentage. What that symbol represent is really the percentage time allocated on this task versus the work week schedule of this resource. So for example, if you have 40 hours, 12 hours would represent 30% of her work, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on this, you can adjust either the percentage or adjust the hours on the task, so it would affect the scheduling of this resource. So basically, those were the two quick ways to assign a resource. We covered the planning using the change resource button and using the schedule tab from the right-hand side panel on the workspace. Now, Dominique's going to bring us another scenario using already assigned placeholders to a project and start assigning actual resource to his project. Back to you, Dominique.
Thank you, Denis. So yeah, flipping into just a different project here. Obviously, similar structure, but just as if the project can be created at a different point in time. Yeah, Denis talked about assigning those, but here I'm on a project that either we just completed the assignments and spread the hours, or I'm using a project that was spun from a template and the information was already put into that. So basically we are at a point where we need to start staffing this actually. So obviously Denis, as he showed, could be direct staffing with people on a project, but here I'm more in a context of project that was created earlier. Now we're ready to staff this. So we just signed it. We had the delivery manager that was informed, and then we have someone that delivery manager coming in and looking into putting real people to start delivering what we promised. So first thing, it's a bit of, obviously it ties into our project management. As Denny mentioned, we want to make sure that when we get into that, our dates are somewhat accurate, so that we can, when we take decision on who's available to do what, we'll have the best information possible. And then also another mention, you see now I'm more of in a type of waterfall with dependencies. It's still valid to use that if you have just a few buckets, just because you get a bit more granular or a bit more information and you get a bit more precise in your planning. So it could be just buckets that you lay out in time here. It doesn't need to be that intricate, or obviously it could be a lot more. So we can play around with those concepts here based on your use cases and how far you want to go with the project management aspect of things. So before I go back to the resource plan for that project, just want to show another view here, which is the assignment grid. So this is a complementary view here that we can use either when we're building and getting up to the point where I'm at right now. It is showing the different assignments that we have on that project. Now I'm showing only blue bubbles here because they're placeholders. Ideally, everyone in your business has changed their pictures in Salesforce, so it's a lot more pleasant when you actually know when it's a placeholder versus an actual person. But it's showing here the assignment grid, those resources, and how those hours were ultimately split across those resources. The information it's showing here is the same that we've been showing when we were in that schedule tab. So we added the resources, we could have added more than one, and then we just split those information. But it just makes it a lot more, I would say, depending on where we're at, it's a bit more efficient as far as splitting hours when you're just building up a price or building up a scope of project. Well, that being said, with my project set up, I will just go one step back here, back on the client, the client standard record, the project record, to access the resource plan. So this is what's going to provide me more on the information, specifically on the assignments. At this point, I see those two placeholders listed, and it shows me the summary of hours total across either weeks, days, or months here. So it's summarizing all those hours that are assigned. Drop down here, I'm going to go to schedule just so, because we're really looking into more of the task related, which we call here schedule in client. And in the setup I'm at, I'm not going to go deeper into that, but I have both planned and schedule in sync. So I'm working really in the mindset where my project is driving my assignments. So anything I do in the schedule, anything I change on the work plan, in this case, in my scenario, everything rolls up to the plan. So we can play around with those concepts depending on the use cases. Today, I'm going to focus really on that one. So if I expand, I see all the details really more on the resource assignment. So if I click on that small plus here, it shows me all those tasks where I have hours assigned for that engagement lead. So from here, I could easily click here on the pencil, go onto the swap resource and say, maybe I know who's going to be engagement lead. He's my next door buddy here at the office. He knows that person's all open. So we could go and say that we are going to put Kenzie on this one here. So I could just select that person, hit save, and now the engagement lead's going to be transferred over to my buddy Kenzie, so that we can quickly swap that resource. So you see that it updated all the records in the back end. I've been updated on that. On that aspect here, I just want to mention, because I went fast on that pencil. And when I click on the pencil, I do have kind of an overall description of this assignment. So how many hours that we have assigned, the start date and end date of the assignment itself. So that's, kind of a high level here. But I want to mention here that status, where we have a list of possibilities. So we could go by, if you don't want to go there, you could just make it booked by default. Booked, when you're booked, you actually assign to the project. And this is what creates, on the project, the visibility for that user. So Kenzie, the way it's, usually set up by default, a project is marked as private, meaning that if you don't have an assignment or you're not the owner of the project, record, then you don't see the project. Book is what's going to provide Kenzie the visibility on that project. But we can also obviously look into soft booking and pipelining those intermediate or preliminary booking statuses. So soft book, you are a scarce resource. You're looking to where we plan to have you on the project, but we're not yet officialized. And we'll see that later. We can use that also when we're revisiting or reviewing the values on the resource planner and in reports. So we could play around with that. Let's say now it's booked. So we can enforce that. And as I say, you could have it that you only have it booked by default. So you don't need to play around with those if you're not there yet. The other approach that we can have to book a resource is to click on solution admin. So the link directly, that will bring us to a supply and demand window. So this is really, again, based on the same type of information. Up top, we have the demand. So what's required for our solution admin, and below who is available and what are available hours based on obviously a subset of resource that we can work around with. So we could have broader or narrower kind of search depending on the list of resource that we have. A side note here, I do have those resource statuses that we can use. This will affect whatever hours is showing here in the middle section. So if I decided to look only at hard booked project and I would to say, okay, apply, it filters down and it also changes the hours reflected here in that middle section. So we can also take decision based on different actual project assignments. So I could decide to book. Let's say it looks like these 3 people here could work. So I could click here in that square and just book that a person, or I could go one extra step and select multiple resources. If you have a wide pool of resource, you don't know necessarily everyone by, to every details. So this is going to be helpful in selecting those resources, especially if you're leveraging the skills. So if you're leveraging and managing the skills with the proficiency level, you can take an informed decision based on who is best at what. So that's going to help on selection, and also maybe cost rate here. If you have a tighter project, maybe you can also select the best fit, but also the best, cost efficiency could be, considered obviously here. So let's say I want to book here Vic, Marlo. Now that, again, like we did with the swap earlier, that's switching all the resources, and we can have that booking directly on that resource. So now we kind of officialize it so that we have that a fully staffed project. So that's kind of my trigger here to send it back to Denis so that we get that broader picture of the whole business going towards the resource planner.
Yes, absolutely. So since the beginning, we're more focused at the project level. So our emphasis is looking at the data at the project level. But if we're thinking about optimizing our resource planning, we definitely want to use Client's Resource Planner. So this gives a global view on all assigned hours. So today's focus was to look at the scheduled hours, which we are currently is the view we're looking at. And right away, we have a lot of visual cues when looking at the resource planner, and our attention is brought to the first, I'll say the first coloring option, which is allowing you to set a color code based on the utilization target. So if you click on the summary color setting button at the top, you could change the utilization range, and this will automatically update the information on the resource planner. So the resource planner really becomes a tool, an operational dashboard with conditional coloring. So if I go back and focus on Jenny Red, for example, I see that she has some red there, which means she's overbooked with the setting I placed. If I click on her, and it's going to expand her assignment. So let's look at a couple of other options. Of course, you see other colors, so I'm going to lead to this in a minute. So the first thing is you see that on the resource planner, it's going to always consider any time off and any holidays. So these will by default be a purple bar, the first line you will see on each resource. The other, then I'm going to bring your attention to the other coloring option, which is the project assignment color code. So you can look at the legend at the top with the other button right there, and it's going to show you whatever you set as color for pipeline, soft book, close, or any statuses you wanted to track on your task assignments. Same on your project assignment, sorry. So if you go back once again to GennyRed, in the green, you see the scheduled hours that are booked. In our case, I'm going to bring your attention to what stands out. So the light pink right there, very useful. It gives you a warning. We wanted to have a color that stands out. And for us, it was the pipeline project, the softbook project, sorry. So I could either decide to change the hours assigned to this resource because it does not fit, or I could change another resource assignment because I absolutely want GennyRed to be part of this pipeline project, and I want these hours to be on her. So or maybe just only postpone these hours for GennyRed a bit later based on what I have in terms of information on that resource planner. So some of you also might have noticed on the left-hand side, there's another useful coloring option. So as there are already colors used right next to the project name. So these are adding another level of information to the resource planner. It just gives you update on the project status. And all of these mentioned coloring option, the 3 I mentioned up to now, are available when you use the Client Config app. You'll see that there is a resource color resource mapping available there, so you'll be able to update this, and we'll go further in another client tutorial for this, very simple in the setup objects. So on top of the coloring options, you got other things, other elements that are going to be useful on the global resource planner. So first thing, maybe looking at the top left, there are filters. Currently, we are using 4 filters to narrow down the resource we're looking at, but you could use a lot of other out-of-the-box filters looking at some client objects. Other things, maybe you can want to change the perspective of what you're looking at. So instead of looking at project resources, you might want to look at this resource planner, but in terms of projects. So if I go to the top right and I change that toggle from project resource to project, it's going to give me a way to compare easily each assignee per project. So quickly you can expand both project and see who was assigned to each project and compare, keep that same color coding that is for another use case, right? So if I go back by resource, there's another last maybe option I could bring you to your attention, which is the on-off toggle at the top that is allowing me to expose the actual hours. So let's go back on the monthly view and just go back to the month of August, because what I want to see is if the project resource actually log the hours. So with the toggle to on, I'll see a kind of a baby blue subline underneath the green scheduled hours so of the project. So that's going to give you another purpose to your resource planner and can support you in better understanding and managing your business and resources in the future. So as you can see, there's a lot of data which allows us endless possibilities and KPIs to follow on resource planning. And Dominic will help us to see other ways to leverage this data and this information by slicing and dicing the data using the native Salesforce report and dashboards. So Dominic, show us the way around.
Thanks, Denis. Just before I segue into more of the dashboard reports, I have a few questions here, and I think it's good that we have them here. So thank you, Amita, for a few questions you've sent, and some of them I can answer right here. So some of you have seen the requested, so the status of request. So there's also a side loop that we can do if you need to do resource requests, and eventually that could be tied into more of a kind of a uh, like an approval process where it could flow and to be sent to some people so that a department could look into that. So I'm not necessarily going to look into this in detail, but yes, we can have resource requests, and that could be tied or sent automatically as we request something to someone. Just needs to be configured to do so. Also, questions on decimals. I do see decimals here. Yes, we don't have capability of changing the number of decimals we're showing, but it does show here because that's probably spread evenly into and spread across several weeks. So that's why we see some of that are decimals. When it's hard dates here, most likely it's that it was 8 hours assigned to a week, or obviously number of hours assigned fit the number of weeks. And so that, yeah. And then there was also a question on maybe the pipeline status, if it was available just in latest version. That's something that is already available in V39. It might just be that the status on the project assignment and the task assignment in the pick list, it's not available. But that's something that is already available for V39 for pipelining if you want to leverage that status there. So it's just a matter of easy configuration there. Great. So I'll keep those for the next questions for later, so that we can wrap this up. And I still have a list of other questions here that I'll go through later. So obviously, as Denise said, the resource planner here is very actionable. There's lots of information that we can leverage. It should be something that you look at with your team weekly, just to make sure that you see what's upcoming. If you're managing the pipeline projects and using the projects as we would encourage into your sales process. So when you scope, you start pipelining projects and you have visibility in what's upcoming. And also foresight, obviously, what's actual projects you've sold. So you could use that, review it by team so that you can take action on the projects to react before the fire arrives. But obviously we can use all that information into reports. I'll start by going to a specific resource, just that, I know that we might have come to that page here and there in other webinars we did, but we feel like there's a lot of information that we can leverage, to go by, walk by our resource, make sure that they're growing with us and making sure that we're tracking the work and the improvements that they're doing. One thing is, here I'm showing more on the actuals on that graph. So maybe Kenzie is a resource that just joined our team. So I'm showing here both billable hours and total hours log. So I can see a very nice progress here. So yes, I'm more on actuals here, but it kind of ties into our resource planning, because eventually if we scroll down, we'll see that we also have whatever was assigned to them and whatever was scheduled for them, and how they kind of also worked and got their numbers based on what was scheduled. So here I'm showing scheduled hours. So that comes from our resource planning versus hours log versus billable hours schedule. Also, we haven't talked about that, but based on the task billable flag or billable checkbox, then obviously we will be able to say this is billable scheduled hours or not. So we can also, with the planning, kind of analyze all those data also and differentiate between hours that are scheduled and billable hours that are scheduled. So that, obviously dropping in reports either here on the resource or on the project directly, we'll be able to kind of view the information differently. And a lot of that here is relying on the resource utilization. So I have here at different places, but obviously on the resource itself, I have a related list, which is resource utilization. This is a process that is managed by automation by Klient, which as you log in time, as you schedule more hours, that is getting updated either on a scheduled batch or live. We do recommend the scheduled batch, especially if you have a wider organization, but that is getting calculated automatically. So if I dig into one record here, I'm going to see that I have different aspects, lots of metrics that I can leverage on the resource, the planning and scheduling aspect here. I have, obviously percentages. So based on either target utilization percentage or work week of what we're expecting, every resources configuration as far as their work schedule, we have those values that are calculated. And here on that right side, have different values that I can use: planned, scheduled availabilities, or scheduled hours. And this is where also we have those pipeline hours or soft book hours, where we can use that in different reporting, because that's being rolled up to the resource utilization over across all projects that the resource is assigned to. So kind of a summarize for that resource. And there's a lot of reports that we're leveraging this record or these data points to build. And obviously actuals as we're logging time, as I was showing in the previous report on the project resource page. You know, obviously this is what we're using to be able to show that on different reports. So that brings me to maybe a dashboard. You know, we love Salesforce for that. Easy to slice and dice data, show it, and show different values on the same. This one's pretty crowdy for maybe for a demo, but shows a lot of interesting aspects and how we can leverage that. So up top here, I'm showing all of these are out of the box reports. Maybe that one here, I just created a subset, kind of a save as based on that, but it's all based on out of the box. So I'm showing, obviously resource plan by month, or even utilization, where it's more on the actuals and managing and actually delivering the project. But if I dig into this one here, the resource plan by month, that it's leveraging the information we just saw from the resource utilization, so scheduled hours versus scheduled availability. So I see a lot of data here, but reports in Salesforce are easy to drill down. So one way of drilling down here, I just select and let me see. I just want to see my engagement lead here in this case, so I can drill down to this report, applying an additional filter to this. So now it makes a bit more sense. It's easier to analyze here, showing me that somewhere in March, I really have an increase in available hours for my resource. So, just for viewing further and trying to plan here, leveraging the resource utilization and the planning that we've done. That can include or not the pipelines, and we can decide what we want to do with that, but really using the reports to our advantage, obviously. And another one here, which is I find quite interesting, maybe a bit more second step here, but all the effort that we're putting here can be leveraged also for hiring and foreseeing who we should either cross train or ask HR to go and hunt for resources that are quite scarce these days. So the resource capacity planning is another one that is quite interesting, where it summarizes or rolls up all the hours based on the roles again, and then splits that up into different categories here. So that one is also out of the box. It dates from, I think, 36, 38 or something. So it should be in 39, obviously. Where it gathers all the information based on either hard allocation, so booked, or excluding pipeline. In that case, it would consider booked and soft booked. But it's really just looking into time here, giving me maybe do I have issues in the future? Should I be hiring, or do I have variations in capacity, so that I can focus on to my hiring or my efforts to get the resource doing the work, or being able to say, okay, sales, focus on this type of project because we're low on we have a high available capacity on this or that type of work. So that's really kind of orienting for the whole team here. So different reports that are quite interesting, I think, using resource utilization, but on top of that, project assignment records, task assignment records would also gather information based on the planning of the resources. So several possibilities here, and depending on how and what we want to look at based on the context. So that's kind of what I wanted to show specifically. So at this point, maybe I'll look into some of the questions here and see if there's anything that we can answer. We have a good 5 minutes remaining. So let me look into a few of those.
A lot of questions, actually.
Sorry? Yeah, there's quite a bit. So I don't know that I'll be able to browse through all of that. Maybe Denis, if you can read a few. So vacation time skews percentage available. 3 days left, that one. So yeah, the vacation time, yeah, does play around. That's why and I'll probably have to go into more the depth for Sally's question here. But the vacation time is, if you're using the time off, showing on the resource planner, that will help on building up to that. It would not necessarily take decision for you. So if you have some vacation upcoming that you put in the system, you're already assigned. That's why we have that dashboard that would be flagged as red, and then you can take actions if you are on to other projects. Do you do you move the projects? Do you swap that resource for just that period? Do you crash the project and add more resource to take the load? So there's different options here. But as far as vacation, the system is not taking decisions for you, because there's several use cases that you might want.
Yeah, someone was asking me what she was doing wrong by assigning planned hours and they were not transferred over to schedule. I answered already by text, but the answer is basically that when you have the syncing option activated, that sync goes from schedule to plan. So planned hours are really hours assigned at the project level, and scheduled or more hours at the task level. So when you change what was referred as view from plan view to the scheduled view, if you have the syncing option, if you work on the schedule, it's going to update your plan hours, but not the other way around.
So thanks. Oh yeah, there's a question here. The good point, Jasmine here. Asking, a bit on the decimals, asking if the decimals would be eventually included in the total. That's a good thing. We have the product manager here on the call, so that's good notes. There's a few things that are being obviously constantly revisited, and we have something on the roadmap to start revisiting the resource planner. So good point, and say, okay, could we have control over number of decimals, or at least showing decimals maybe on the rolled up values. So thanks for that, Jasmine. Jeremy, I'm pretty sure you took notes on that. If you add a resource to a project, then they book fully time in 6 months within the. So yeah, the question is a bit related to the vacations. So if there's, you fully book someone for a certain period, and for some reason, let's like here, they take vacation and you'd like to remove that. So yes, that's where it is something that is actually, we can actuate on the value. So for some reason, if you wanted to change that, even here in the resource planner, for some reason I need to remove that week for that resource because they're out on vacation, I could double click here and say delete. So that's going to delete the assignment for that period. Mind you, it needs to be, it will be based off of the filters that you have. So if I was to delete that here, it will delete for the whole month. If I was to go into week view, then it would delete that block for the time scale that I have.
So just an add-on to my previous point, where the person is asking me, should we start by setting up scheduled hours instead of planned hours? It really depends on your use case. So there's no good or bad answer to this. If you start in your flow, if you're starting by planning hours and you're thinking about the number of hours to be done by a project resource, it's good to use the planned hours. But once your project gets into the more operational phase, that's where you're going to want to use the scheduled hours. But then depending on your business process, you might want or not to update the plan hours. So there's no good answer. It really depends on your business process for this.
Sorry, yeah, there's another question here by Senkit on the how we can get either spread across weeks or not, so the distribute evenly aspect. So that ties in either, depending on how we do it. One thing is that if we don't want that to be spread, we want to focus it into a certain aspect. I did not cover that, but let me just expand on that, and maybe that could be the last question. I'll think, I was expecting a lot of questions. What we'll do is all the questions that we don't have time, we'll probably gather that and do a part 2, so we can cover different use cases and get back to any questions also that we did not have time to answer. But maybe just one step further, something that we haven't talked about. So I'm clicking here on a task. It brings over the same right side panel that we had when we were in the workspace. So let me just click here to get a bit more detail. So there's a concept here of on your scheduling mode that you eventually could experiment, or it could circle back a bit more on it, but there's a concept of fixed effort also. So depending on how you're planning your project, there's a concept of fixed effort. So the task duration of the task duration would be driven by how many people you put on the task and their percentage that you put them on those tasks. So let's say you have 40 hours, you put one person available 100%, that's going to take a week. But if you put one person 50%, then the task length would be stretched 2 weeks. So it's not exactly the question you're asking, but that's one concept of having the task or the assignments, not necessarily spreading across a whole duration. Other than that, another thing that I haven't covered here is that if I was to click here on that, that's not necessarily available to every UI. So that's where there's a difference here in the version. But if I'm to click here on that calendar beside that timeline, I can even decide if that person's working, I'm assigning that person only on Mondays. So I could decide to say this is 8 hours, but only on Mondays. So that wouldn't be spreading my hours, would be, just assigning some hours on Mondays for that resource. So that's another way of getting into more of the granular aspect of assigning. The easy way in is to spread across so that you get a general idea, but you can start being a bit more detailed into either doing this, or we have lots of customers that are, if we have someone focusing on resource management, you can even start moving those blocks around here and say, okay, this is not going to be done here. We can move and drag and drop those blocks and, change those hours and say, okay, this is going to be done into another period. Mind you that we're here on a project-driven kind of work plan, so we are maybe going out of the plan, the structure of the project. So we can do that, maybe more on the plan level, but on the scheduling, recommending that we work with the work schedule in that aspect.
And there's a very good question, Dominic, about talking about project, where it's going to probably be one of the base of our next resource planning webinar together, where we'll focus more at the project level more than the task level. We will not approach this today, but that's definitely going to be covered in our next planning webinar. That's for sure.
Okay. So I will need to kind of need to stop at one point. Lots of very good questions. We'll gather all of those. They're all saved. So we'll do a follow-up either by recordings or in the part 2, as I said. So that we'll try to cover all the questions that you guys asked. So that brings me basically to my next, just the closing note here on the next session that is upcoming. So as we complete this Zoom and end this call, there'll be a survey. So we ask you to fill the survey a bit like last time. It did influence quite immensely this webinar, because it was voted for resource planning in the June webinar that we did. That's what you wanted to talk about. That's what we did. So I do strongly recommend that you go onto this survey. Obviously, a rating on how useful you found this webinar, and an open topic question where you can put comments or suggestions for next call. So we'll gather all that information and get back to you with the topic for the next one. On that, all I have to say is thanks. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming over. We are just starting. Lots of information coming over to you with what Yannick presented, with the university, with the great work of Denis in the last weeks to prepare and add a lot of data and documentation so that you can learn better the tool, retrain yourself, re-enable, and then onboard the rest of your team. So working hard on this. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Denis. Any
Thank
closing?
you, Dominic. Thank you, Dominic. Very glad to be part of this, and can't wait for the next session.
Great. Thanks. and then see you next time. Feel free to reach out if there's anything to me, to Denis, or to the support team. Obviously, we'll be glad to help you further.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.